Hi everyone, how's it going? I'm Bill Graham. Welcome back to my channel. Recently I got an email from one of my viewers asking me about applying 6th Diminished to the standard tune All of Me. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Let's get right into it. All of Me is a 32-bar tune in A-B-A-C form. Let's take a look at the chord changes and do a quick analysis. So if we play it in the key of C, the A section is going to start off on the 1 chord, C6. And then the next chord is E7. So it's not enough to just call this the 3 dominant chord. We got to know what key this dominant chord is borrowed from. So in the key of C, E7 is borrowed from the 6th chord, A minor. So we're going to call that 5 of 6. So that's starting on the 1 chord, and then we go to 5 of 6. And we expect that to resolve to the 6th chord. But instead it goes straight to another dominant chord. It goes to a dominant chord on the 6th. And so we can't just call this 6 dominant, we got to know where this comes from too. So this A7 is borrowed from the 2, D minor. So we said C6, the 1 chord, E7 is 5 of 6, and then that went to A7, which is 5 of 2, and then that goes to D minor 6, which is the 2 chord. And that's the A section. Moving on to the B section, we start on E7, which is again 5 of 6, and this time it goes to an actual 6th chord, goes to A minor. And then we go to D7, which is borrowed from the key of the 5. So D7 is 5 of 5, and that goes to 5. G7. Okay, that was the B section. Now we go back and do the A section again. 1 to 5 of 6 to 5 of 2 to 2. And now the C section, we're going to start on the 4 chord, F6, and then there are 2 different options that people play often. A lot of times we'll go to the minor 4, F minor 6, and that's of course borrowed from the parallel minor, and then we'll go back to the 1, C6. Now sometimes instead of going to the minor 4, people will go from the 4 to the sharp 4 diminished, which, remember, sharp 4 diminished is really the tonic diminished, the common tone diminished. So this is really a C diminished, just in second inversion. And C diminished can lead back to C6. A lot of times the bass player will play the 5th in the bass under that chord. And then we're going to go to A7, which is 5 of 2, and then we're going to end the form with a 2, D minor 7, 5, G7, and then back to 1, C6. Alright, so now that we understand the basic chord changes of this tune, we can start talking about what 6 diminished scales we can use on each chord to create harmonic movements. So on the 1 chord, C6, of course, our first obvious choice is to play C6 diminished. Right? Or we could also play G6 diminished, which is the 6th on the 5th. And that gives us a C major 9 kind of a sound. To F sharp diminished, which is of course again really C diminished. So that F sharp diminished leading into G6 over C is a really nice sound of like a tonic diminished going to a major 9 sound. And that could, of course, just resolve right to C6. Or Barry likes to also take it from the 6th on the 5th, drop these 2 notes chromatically to make it a diminished on the 5th, and then connect that back into a 6th on the root. Let's practice that little movement in every inversion. So 6th on the 5th, diminished on the 5th, 6th on the 1. And then up to the next inversion, 6th on the 5th, diminished on the 5th, 6th on the 1. Next inversion, 6th on the 5th, diminished on the 5th, 6th on the 1. And finally, next inversion, 6th on the 5th, diminished on the 5th, 6th on the 1. So even though that movement doesn't, strictly speaking, come out of a 6th diminished scale, Barry plays it and teaches it a lot, and it's a really pretty movement, so I think it's important for you to practice it. Another one that's similar to that, with rising chromatic notes instead of falling chromatic notes that Barry teaches and plays a lot, is what I think of as the Count Basie movement. So this one is like we're playing a 6th chord on the 4, and then we take these two notes and we raise them a half step to play a diminished on the 1, and then raise them another half step to play a 6th on the 1. Let's play that in every inversion. Let's play that same little walk-up starting from the 1 chord. So C6, F6, C diminished, C6. Next inversion. C6, F6, C diminished, C6. Next inversion. C6, F6, C diminished, C6. And the last inversion. C6, F6, C diminished, C6. There's another variation of that movement that Bud Powell liked to play a lot, where he'd start on a 1-6 chord, and then go to the diminished from 6th diminished, and then up to a tonic diminished into a tonic 6th. So in C we're playing C6, B diminished, C diminished, into C6. And Bud would like to jump up an inversion in between each one of those chords. Might play something like this. Okay, so next let's look at our E7 chord. And so E7 is borrowed from the key of A minor. So the first thing that we can play is the A minor 6th diminished scale starting on the diminished, which is going to be G sharp diminished. So we'll put our E in the bass, play our G sharp diminished chord over that, or we could play, since this is resolving to a minor key, we could play the minor 6th on the flat 2, minor 6th diminished on the flat 2, which for E7 is going to be F minor 6th diminished. So F minor 6, E diminished, 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 F minor 6th. Next up, we've got A7, which is borrowed from the key of D minor. So we've got basically those same two options on this A7 chord. So we could play the D minor 6th diminished, starting on the diminished. It's going to be C sharp diminished, so we'll play A, C sharp diminished over that. And then we'll play our D minor 6th diminished scale, starting from the diminished. Or, again, since this is resolving to a minor key, we could play our minor 6th diminished on the flat 2. And so the flat 2 of A7 is going to be B flat. So let's play B flat minor 6th diminished over that A7. Next up, we've got the 2 chord, which would normally be D minor 7, but in this case, it really is supposed to sound like a tonic minor, so we got to play minor 6. And so the scale for that is, of course, D minor 6 diminished. Let's practice borrowing 2 notes at a time from the diminished above, or the 6th above. So now we're going back to E7. And we're going to have the same 2 scales of chords available as we had last time we played E7. That's going to be A minor 6 diminished, starting from the diminished. And again, that's because E7 is the 5 of the key of A minor. So this is going to give us what we would typically call E7 flat 9, like if you're looking at a chart written in non-Barry language. So let's play that scale up and down. Or we could play the minor 6 on the flat 2, so that's going to be F minor 6 diminished. And that's going to give us what we would typically see on a chart as being flat 9 sharp 5, or flat 9 flat 13, right? So let's play F minor 6 up and down over the E. Next up, we've got the 6 chord, which again would typically be A minor 7, but here we want it to sound like a tonic minor chord, so we're going to play A minor 6. And that means we're going to play the A minor 6 diminished scale on it. Let's play that up and down. Let's try practicing that a couple different ways. Let's play up an inversion and then down to the next chord, and then up an inversion of that. And then let's reverse that on the way down. Okay, what about if we went up an inversion and then went up to the next chord instead of down? Next we're going to D7, which is 5 of 5. Now, since it's borrowed from the key of the 5, which is G, that means it's resolving to a major chord instead of a minor chord. So first thing we should think is minor 6th on the 5th to give us a dominant 9 kind of a sound. So the minor 6th on the 5th of D is A minor 6. That's the same scale that we've been playing, A minor 6 diminished. Let's try playing that scale in thirds, just over a D7 chord in the left hand. Notice the major second that you get if you're following that strictly, because we've got a 6th chord, and in one inversion of a 6th chord, we're going to have this major second. So if you play that, you can get some sounds like this. And then that 5 of 5 is going to resolve to 5, which is G7. So let's think about the minor 6th on the 5th of G. That's going to be D minor 6. So let's play up and down the D minor 6 diminished scale. Or let's play the tritone of that, the minor 6 on the flat 2. It's A flat minor 6. Or, of course, just C6 diminished, starting on the diminished, because we're in the key of C, and G7 is the 5 chord in the key of C. So we'll start on that B diminished. That'll give us a G7 flat 9 kind of a sound. Let's play up and down that scale. We could have also, instead of going straight from 5 of 5 to 5, we could have taken 5 of 5 to 2 to 5. And so the 2 chord is going to be D minor 7. And remember, Barry tells us to always think about the 2 chord as actually being the 4 chord with the 6th in the bass. So instead of thinking about D minor 7, we're going to think about F 6th and just put D in the bass. Let's play F6 diminished up and down. And then we can also play the 6th on the 5th. So we're on F6. The 5th of F6 is C, so we can play C6. Let's try playing C6 to F6. Let's try borrowing some notes. So we're going to play F6 diminished, and we're going to play 2 notes from the chord above and then resolve them down. And then we'll jump up to the next inversion. So check this out. We're going to put a D in the bass. We've got 2 notes from F6, and 2 notes from E diminished. Going to resolve them down to F6, and then jump up to the next F6. So one more time on that first movement. And then now we're going to go to our E diminished, 2 notes of E diminished, and then on top of that, 2 notes of F6, which are going to resolve down to E diminished, and then up to the next inversion. So one more time that movement. Those first 2 movements. And then continuing on, 2 notes of F6, 2 notes of E diminished, resolving down into F6, and up an inversion. E diminished, 2 notes of E diminished, 2 notes of F6, resolving down to E diminished, and up an inversion. 2 notes of F6, 2 notes of E diminished, resolving down, and up an inversion. 2 notes of E diminished, and 2 notes of F6, resolving down, up an inversion. 2 notes of F6, 2 notes of E diminished, resolve down, up an inversion. 2 notes of E diminished, 2 notes of F6, resolve down and up an inversion, and then now we're an octave above where we started. Let's try that whole exercise. Alright, now that's the first half of the tune. Next we go back and do the A section again, and that's going to be the same. So we've got C6 to E7 again, to A7, to D minor 6. And those are all going to use the same scales that we used last time. Now the C section can start one of two ways. It can go from the 4 to the 4 minor, so that would be F6 to F minor 6, and that's exactly what the scales are going to be, F6 diminished to F minor 6 diminished. Minor 6 now. The other way that the C section can start is by going from 4 to sharp 4 diminished. And now the scale of chords that we're going to play on sharp 4 diminished is what you might traditionally call the whole half diminished scale. But Barry doesn't like to call it that. He likes to explain it a different way. So I don't know if you've seen my video, Bebop Improvisation 101, the first episode, but in that episode I talk about a concept of Barry's called the family of 4 dominants. And the basic gist of that is that if you take a diminished 7th chord and lower any of the 4 tones, you're going to get a dominant 7th chord. So if we take this F sharp diminished here, let's lower the F sharp to F, we've got F7. Let's put it back. If we lower the A, we get A flat, and now that's A flat 7. Okay, let's put it back. If we take the C and lower it to B, now we have B7. And if you take the E flat and lower that, we've got D7. So those 4 notes that we get, those 4 new roots of the family of 4 dominants, are starting at F sharp diminished, F, A flat, B, and D, which are themselves a diminished 7th chord. So if we make up a scale of those 2 diminished 7th chords, we get what is typically called the whole half diminished, but what we're thinking of it here is as a diminished chord with the extra diminished chord below it coming from the family of 4 dominants, sort of tonicizing that diminished chord. I'm probably going to do a whole video on that extra diminished chord below the diminished, because that has pretty vast, profound implications. And then the rest of the song is all chords that we've already had before. So it goes back to C6, except this time there's probably a G in the bass, to A7, or and then to D minor 7, which we've already had, really F6, right? To G7, back to C major. And then we've just got to play a turnaround of some kind to get back to the top of the tune. So we could play something as simple as just 1, 6, 2, 5, back to 1. Or maybe we could make that 6 a dominant, so it's actually going to be 1, 5 of 2 to 2, 5, 1. We could have made that a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. We could have taken the tritone of the 5, right? So we could have said 1, 6, 2, 5, 1. Tritone sub for 5, I mean. We could have taken the tritone sub of the 6 also. So we could have said 1, tritone sub for 6, 2, tritone sub for 5, 1. We could have played the Tad Dameron turnaround, the Hollywood turnaround. So that's where we go 1 to tritone sub for 6, or tritone sub for 5 of 2, I mean. And then instead of going to 2, we're going to resolve where this is actually pointed, which is A flat major. It's the flat 6. And then we're going to go to tritone sub for 5. Back to 1. So one more time, that would be in the key of C. C, E flat 7, A flat major, D flat 7, back to C major. Okay, there are a ton of different turnarounds that you could possibly play. We could have made that a flat 3 diminished, right? We could have said 1, flat 3 diminished, 2, 5, 1. Tons of different options. That 6, 5 of 2, we could have made that a diminished, so a 7 diminished of 2. So we could have said C6, C sharp diminished, D minor 7, G7, C6. Many, many different options. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do a video about turnarounds. Getting all of these pretty 6th diminished movements under your fingers is tempting to want to play them all the time. So make sure that you still think about leaving space. Remember that comping is accompaniment. So even though we've got all of these chords, try just playing a couple of them. Just play a few little chords to make some movements underneath the soloist or underneath the vocalist or whoever is playing the melody, and it'll sound really beautiful. So far, we've only really been discussing the dimension of pitch. However, the dimension of rhythm is just as important, if not more important, as what pitches we choose to put in our chords. So make sure you're listening to all the great piano players from the 40s and 50s, people like Bud Powell, Barry Harris, of course, Tommy Flanagan, Hank Jones. If you want to go back a little bit further, people like Teddy Wilson. Maybe if you want to go forward a little bit, people like Red Garland and Wynton Kelly. And listen to their rhythmic phrasing and try and take as much as you can from it. And for that matter, make sure you're listening to drummers, people like Max Roach and Kenny Clark and Art Blakey and Philly Joe Jones, and listen to how they phrase things rhythmically, and try and take those and apply them to how you play your chords. Alright, now that we understand which scales of chords we can use on each of these chord changes, let's try putting it all together and playing through a chorus of this tune. Now with Barry's system, there's such infinite variety of harmonic color available. We're just going to take one of the possible paths, but there are really infinite paths through any given chord changes. They could be subtle differences, small nuances, or they could be vast gulfs of, totally different color. But we're just going to take one path and let's see what happens. Alright, I could talk about this stuff all day long, but I think I'm going to cut it off right here. I want you guys to try and figure out the movements that I played in that chorus. If you need help, let me know in the comments, and maybe if enough people comment, I'll do another video where I analyze what I played. If you're finding this all to be a bit overwhelming, try working on it on simpler tunes with shorter forms. Maybe things like St. Thomas, or Lady Bird, or Solar. And of course, keep working on it on the blues. That's about it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to buy my book, it's available on Amazon, and also a PDF is available on my website. I'll leave links for both of those in the description. If you'd like to take some Skype lessons, or if you like what I'm doing on the channel and you'd like to donate via PayPal, I'll leave a link for my email address in the description as well. Please make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Until next time, take it easy.